Hello Greenstylers, Cynthia here, and today we will be sewing the Brighton Pullover together. Follow the entire video to sew every step of the way with me, or use the hyperlinks in the video description to skip to the step that you'd like to see. Here are the pieces that you'll need to cut to make the Brighton Pullover with the zipper collar. The front bodice piece is called B1. This piece will be cut on the fold, and you'll need to make sure to cut the appropriate neckline. If you're doing the zipper collar like I am, your neckline will look like this. Be sure to trace those neckline markings. And there are notches on the neckline, on the sleeve seams. There are some circle markings that you'll want to make sure to get onto your pattern pieces that will be important when making your hem. So there's lots to make sure you mark. The back bodice piece is labeled B2, and that instruction says to cut 2 mirror images. You'll want to make sure to get those notches on the sleeve seam. And make sure to transfer those circle markings onto your fabric as well. And a final note about the back piece. If you have plenty of fabric and would like to, you can cut it on the fold. Just be sure to take out that 3/8 inches seam allowance in the center. The sleeves are labeled piece S1, and you'll need to cut 2 of these as mirror images of each other. If you're using cotton French terry like I am, you'll find that it loves to curl at the edges, but let me go ahead and pull this down so you can see what the piece looks like. There you go. Make sure to get the double notches for the back and single notches for the front. And you can cut those notches inward or outward, whichever way you prefer. There's also piece C1, and you'll need one of these for the collar. Mine is made out of rib knit, but you can also use your main knit for this piece. Just make sure it's structurally sound enough to handle a zipper, and you'll want to make sure to use the piece that's labeled cut 1 of main knit. Be sure to transfer the center markings, the notches, and also the dots on the top and the bottom. There's plenty of marking to keep you busy when working with these pieces. Yours will look a little different from mine, as this is an earlier version of the pattern. The other piece you'll cut out of rib knit is piece S2, or the arm cuff. But if your main fabric is very stretchy with 75% stretch, you can use that for this piece as well. Make sure to transfer those markings. And finally, you'll need a number 3 zipper that's 10 inches long. A little longer, such as 12 inches, is fine, and some Wonder Tape will come in really handy for attaching that zipper. Let's get started. If you cut the back piece as 2 mirror images, you're going to lay them with right sides together, pin along that long center seam, and stitch them together with a stretch stitch or serger and 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you've pressed that seam, bring over the sleeve pieces. You want to pay attention to the double notch and single notch side, and match up the double notches with the double notches on the back piece. Pin along the arm side. Make sure your pieces are right sides facing, and repeat with the other sleeve. Now stitch both of these seams with a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Here's how it will look after they are stitched. Press that seam over toward the sleeve. I like to press from the inside and then again from the outside. If you'd like to top stitch, you'll be doing it over the sleeve side of the seam. Now we'll do a quick stay stitch over that neck opening on the front piece. This will add stability to that front piece so it doesn't stretch out as we're working it. And we definitely want to do this before manipulating that front piece. We'll begin stitching at one end, turn the corner, and stop at the center. Then we'll start at the other end and stop at the center again. To stay stitch, we'll use a straight stitch and slightly shorten the stitch length. I like to use 2.0. As mentioned before, we're going to start at one end, and we're going to stitch straight to the circle, leave the needle down, turn the fabric, and then stitch to the center of the neckline. I accidentally went a little too far, but that's okay. Clip your threads and then start at the other end and come back down, ending at the center. Now we're ready to attach the front piece to the back and sleeves. So we're back at the table, and here is the other edge of our sleeves and the back pieces in the center. So those are the edges where we'll be attaching our front piece, and here you can see our stay stitching in the center. Match the notches and then pin the entire seam with right sides facing. Then repeat with the other side. We'll stitch the front piece to the sleeves using a stretch stitch or serger in a 3/8 inch seam allowance. After you've attached the front piece, you can once again press those seams toward the sleeve. And again, I like to press from the wrong side and then flip it over and press once more from the right side, making sure it's nice and flat. Lay everything out on the table like so. It's like a huge diamond or star shaped. Now you'll just want to finish or neaten those raw edges of all 4 side seams right along here with a serger or a zigzag stitch. Now you're ready to fold the whole thing in half so you can match up the front and back side seams. Make sure to match up the sleeve seams and also the circle markings. We'll be stitching from the sleeve all the way down the side seam, and we're going to actually stop right at those circle markings. So you can make sure that your final pin is there at the circle markings, and that'll help you know when to stop. For this stitch, I recommend using the sewing machine and using a stretch stitch. I like stitch number 6 for this purpose. It's a pretty narrow stitch and we'll be able to iron that seam open very easily. The triple straight stitch, number 5 on my machine, would be another really good option for this. It just takes a little bit longer to stitch that one. When you get to the circle markings, you'll want to back and forth stitch a few times to really secure the end of that stitch. Since my machine won't back stitch on number 6, I'll switch over to a straight stitch and just back and forth a few times to really reinforce that end. You can also add a bar tack down there if you'd like. And here you can see how my side seam still has stretch because of the stitch I used. Construction for the sleeve cuffs is going to be just like any other sleeve cuff. They are just tapered at the end. Since it's such a long cuff, it needs to be a little wider up on your forearm. So you will fold them in half with the long sides touching raw edges. Make sure they are right sides together and pin them along that long edge. All right, let's get those cuffs stitched up. I will be using a straight stitch to stitch mine. That'll be stitch 1 on my machine. You could use a serger. You could also use a triple straight stitch or a lightning bolt stitch. My cuffs, as you can see, they do not have vertical stretch much at all. So I am not worried about pulling on that seam vertically, and a straight stitch will work fine. When you get to that fold marking, treat it like a corner. With your needle down, lift your foot and turn your fabric. Iron that seam nice and flat. I swear I am like the princess in the pea when it comes to seams in cuffs. I do not like bumpy lumpy seams, and I will do everything in my power to make sure they're nice and flat, including sewing machine stitches and irons. Fold it in half so that the right side is out and the wrong sides are touching. Line up those seams and then also line up the notches. Take a little more fiddling to get it nice and straight, especially if you're working with cotton that'll want to stick to itself. But there you have it. Now you're ready to attach it to the shirt. With the shirt wrong side out, line up the cuff seam with the underarm side seam on that sleeve and slip that cuff inside of the shirt. You're going to pin the notch of the sleeve with the notch on the cuff, and you're going to pin the seam of the cuff with the seam on the shirt. Use a stretch stitch or serger to attach those cuffs to the sleeve, and you will need to stretch that cuff a bit in order to make it fit. Here's a little tip or technique for beginners serging a circle. When you serge on, you're not quite yet at the 3/8 inch seam allowance. So when you get back to that spot in the circle, you're going to stitch past it about an inch in order to serge off that excess seam allowance that was still hanging on there. And then you're going to turn your knife off and serge for another inch. And that will give you a nice clean circle. Now for the part we've all been waiting for, the zipper collar. You're going to love this cool construction. Grab your wash away Wonder Tape and adhere a strip of it to the edge of the collar. Yours will look a little bit different from mine, as this is an earlier version of the pattern. This edge will be curved for you. Turn your zipper so that the right side is facing down toward the collar, and I just want to point out this top edge is what's going to line up with that center marking that you copied over from the pattern piece. So line up the zipper tape with the top of that zipper that I pointed out right at that line. You're going to match the edge of the zipper tape with the edge of the collar. And here's a close-up so you can see where the top of the zipper stop or zipper pull is right butted up against that line marking. Use your sewing machine set to a basting stitch, and with your zipper foot attached, you're going to baste the zipper to the collar where you just adhered it with the Wonder Tape. Since I'm just basting, I'll just go ahead and start below the zipper pull, and then I will move that zipper pull out of the way and stitch the top part separately. Begin your stitching at the top of the teeth, not at the top of the tape. And now we're going to take that excess top of the tape above the teeth and fold it sort of diagonally out of the way in order to fold the other half of the collar down over the edge of the zipper tape. So we want to line up a few things. Line up all of the raw edges, and this is very important. Make sure you line up the bottom edge of that collar, and I'll show you in just a little while why that is so important. And this time you'll be using the standard stitch length since it's going to be your permanent stitch. Stitch close to those teeth by lining up the teeth with the little notch on your zipper foot. Then we'll turn it right side out and check out that cool zipper action. Again, check out those bottom edges and make sure that they are still aligned. Now we'll complete those same steps on the other side of the collar. Begin by adhering some Wonder Tape. And just to clarify, the collar should be sitting with the right side facing up. So the side that I'm attaching the Wonder Tape to is the right side, and also you can see the right side of the zipper is facing up on the other end as well. Grab the zipper and you are going to fold it over so that it is now right side facing down onto the right side of the other side. And just like before, you're going to line up the top of that zipper pull or the top of the zipper stop, right butted up against that line that you've drawn on the pattern. You'll also line up the edges of the zipper tape with the raw edge of the fabric. Now I'm going to pause the video here because I want to show you very clearly what I'm talking about when I say to make sure that you've lined up the bottom edges. Here is a zoomed in picture of what I'm talking about, and there's the bottom edge right there. Those edges of the fabric should all hit the exact same spot on the zipper teeth. As you can see, mine do not, and that will be a problem later. So if yours looks like this, pull out those stitches and re-stitch your zipper. And just like before, we will first baste the single layer of the fabric onto the zipper tape and make sure that you stitch only up to the top of the teeth. Then you will fold that excess bit down and out to the side so that it's out of the way, and then fold the other half of the collar down over the zipper tape, lining up the raw edges of fabric and the edge of the zipper tape all together. And again, you'll want to check that bottom edge that we just talked about. Switch back to the standard stitch length, line up the zipper teeth against your zipper foot and stitch that zipper in place. And here I'm just finding that zipper pull so that I can pull it down and out of the way to start my stitch. Once I make sure I know exactly where those teeth are, I will get them lined up under the zipper foot and get started stitching. Use those thread tails to help you start stitching right along the edge of the fabric. You can pull them gently toward the back and that'll help you get going. Turn everything to the right side, and then you can see, voila, you've created a cool little zippered collar ready to attach to the front of your pullover. Before attaching the collar to the front of the pullover, we need to clip the corners. So the two corners at the bottom of the front will be clipped all the way to your stitch line. So clip as close as you can to the stitch line. Just be very careful that you don't actually clip the stitching. And it'll look like this once you've done so. Turn your collar so that it is wrong side facing out. And here you can see my zipper pull is facing toward the inside. So that part is going to be facing in towards your pullover when you slip the collar over the pullover. And you have to kind of squish the pullover in there. But what you want to do is pull it down enough so that that edge of the collar matches up with the bottom edge of the front neckline. Pin the collar to that front edge of the neckline with right sides facing, and match up the dots on your collar with the dots on the pullover. You can already see how that uneven fabric on the zipper is going to create a diagonal line when I stitch from dot to dot. It's funny how you don't notice things in the heat of the moment sometimes when you're doing a new skill. I didn't even realize what I was doing at the time, but looking back on the video, it's so clear and obvious that I was going to create a crooked front neckline. So learn from my mistake and make sure that your collar is stitched evenly on that zipper, and you'll have a straight front line on your neckline. But you're going to stitch from dot to dot using a straight stitch on your sewing machine. If you stitch just barely outside of that stay stitch line, then you don't have to pull it out later on and it will not show from the outside. When you get to the zipper teeth, use your hand crank to slowly move the needle up and down so you can get over those teeth safely. Then when we get to the dot, we're going to leave the needle in the down position in order to lift the foot and realign the edges of the fabric, turning everything so that we can rotate and stitch a couple inches up the side of the neck opening. We'll stitch just about to the end of the stay stitching. So at this point we've stitched all across the bottom of the neck opening and then a couple inches up one side. We need to stitch with straight stitch a couple of inches up the other side of the front collar. So I'll go ahead and pin that in place. And just like on the other side, you'll be stitching with a straight stitch and a standard stitch length, and stitch just on the outside of that stay stitch line so you don't have to go back and pull it out later. And at this point I'm thinking, whoa, why is this so crooked? But now we all know it was because of that collar and the way it was stitched to the zipper. But pull yours out, take a look, double check and make sure there aren't any puckers. And right here I'm checking those stay stitch threads and thinking this whole thing is going to need to be restitched. Happens to the best of us. Don't feel bad if you have to do it too. It's a lot of layers to get through, so just work on getting everything aligned from the beginning and stitching outside of those stay stitch lines, and it should go really well for you. But once you are satisfied with that pullover to collar stitching, you can pin the rest of the neckline to the collar. There are notches about halfway up the front of the neckline that match with notches on the collar, and then you'll want to match the center back of the neckline with the center back of the collar. Add a few more pins, and then you can stitch using a straight stitch all the way around because this is a really big neck opening and you won't have to pull on it at all to get your head in. But if your fabric is very light and super stretchy and you're afraid you might naturally pull on it and pop those stitches, you can obviously use a stretch stitch or serger for this section as well. I'm actually basting mine on at first, which I often do with neck bands and hem bands anyway, but I'm definitely doing it here because I know I'll be removing the collar and fixing it. But basting it on first is also a really good option for a beginner, or if you just like to be really careful and make sure it looks good before you make your permanent stitch. If you attached your collar with a straight stitch, you'll want to go ahead and finish those edges on the inside with a serger or zigzag stitch and trim off any excess zipper. Heavier fabrics with more body, such as this Greenstyle French terry, will have more of this bubbling effect on the back. It will be less because future versions were adjusted, but if you have that, a good press and a top stitch will take care of that. To finish the hem, we'll start by ironing the seam allowance open. If you use this sewing machine and finished those edges with a serger, you can iron it right open all the way down to the bottom of the hem. If you stitch the side seams together using a serger, you'll just have one seam with the two pieces stuck together. What you'll do is clip right here, and you'll clip down to that left needle thread. Just don't clip through that left needle thread. Then you can push to one side and iron that seam allowance flat from here all the way down to the bottom. We'll be using our sewing machine for this step, and what we're going to do is stitch from the bottom of that split hem, and we're going to top stitch straight up to the top of the split. With your needle down, lift the foot to turn 90 degrees to go across the top, and then again to head straight down to the bottom of the other side of the split hem. Here is how your finished split hem will look. Repeat this on the other side. Now to finish the bottom, you have several options for finishing. Basically, you're going to fold that bottom edge up 1 inch. I finished that raw edge with a serger just to make it a little bit neater on the inside. You could use a cover stitch and you wouldn't need to finish that edge. Or if you had a thinner fabric, you could fold a 1/4 inch and then fold again in order to just hide that raw edge. I'm going to take my serger tail and just hide it within that fold and top stitch with my sewing machine. I'll be hemming once again with a straight stitch and a top stitch length, which I like to use 3.0 millimeters for my top stitch length, but as I mentioned before, you could use a twin needle or a cover stitch or even a zigzag stitch to finish this hem if you like. And there we have it. Lovely little split hem. I just love it. It's so easy and it's so cute. And you are all done. Congratulations on completing your very own Greenstyle Brighton Pullover. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know in the comments what you thought, and let us know how you like your Brighton Pullover. Share your Brighton Pullover photos on social media using hashtag #GSBrighton. We can't wait to see your makes. Happy sewing from all of us at Greenstyle.